By way of introduction, my name is Bob Runyon. I'm a researcher that has been at this for the last 23 years, 24 years that it's been, and it's been uh, some interesting delve into the most completely insane thing to me personally is the fact that there is intense psychological warfare going on because I have approached college professors and students at college, and nobody wants to touch this as far as an academic examination of what may have happened or may not have happened, and uh, that's very sad that the academic community has been so badly beaten up that uh, you're just we're not touching that. We'll not talk about that subject. And it's uh, the psychological warfare, and I don't know how to get past that because I didn't study psychology in school, and it's a foreign subject. So um, that's all I have is fundamentally the physical science facts about what we have. And what I planned on doing was going over what was in the official story and then go over the reasons why the official story can't possibly be true. And so what we have right up here is a still frame from a video that was shot, well, allegedly shot on 9/11, but it shows the south wall of the South Tower with an airplane embedded in the side of the building. And a really critical feature of this is the fact that there is seen no breakage of the plane, no wreckage that breaks off and falls down the side of the building. The plane appears to be whole, as in the fuselage did not break up. There is no breakage seen at all. There is no change in attitude. And this is actually very remarkable. There we go. Okay, this is what I wanted to present. Yeah. Do you see the automobile crash now?
Correct,
Yes,
yes.
yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So the reason why the rear wheels come up on this is that the center of mass of the car is above, it's higher than the point of contact with whatever it runs into. And the effect increases with increased speed. Obviously, a similar run into something at 10 miles per hour would not bring the rear wheels off the ground. This was done at 60, and definitely there was enough energy to raise the rear wheels off the ground. Uh, the significance of this is it's a demonstration of, yes, there is an effect that comes of some offset between the place where the center of mass is and where it makes contact with an obstacle, and that the effect increases with increased speed. So, according to the official story on the subject, Flight 175 met the south wall of the South Tower in an attitude as shown here. And it is definitely offset from going straight in. And there's actually a table where they explain that there is a 3 degrees deviation. If there's what's called the longitudinal axis of the plane, which is nose to tail, if you just draw a line straight through the middle of the plane, that's the longitudinal axis. And what would be ideal if a plane were attempting to penetrate a wall like this is if the direction of travel were actually in the same as the longitudinal axis, but there is a 3 degrees deviation from this admitted in the official story about this and there'll be people who try to hand wave it away and go, oh, 3 degrees is insignificant. At 500 miles per hour, the magnitude of forces developed within that 3 degrees would be sufficient to cause the plane to deflect and to change attitude at such time as it did meet an obstacle like the wall. And that's and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get the academics involved, because in terms of academics, somebody could actually calculate a value for, okay, this 3 degrees deviation will cause X megajoules of energy to be expressed in this direction, and they could plot out a mess of vectors and do this. But the academic community is resistant to anything like that. That's really frustrating. So that's where that's at. But as a as a reason why the plane crash could not have been as it was alleged to have been. The other thing that comes of this is notice that the jet engines are ahead of the wing in this form. And the plane, if it did either crush the nose of the plane against the wall or penetrate either way, gets down to the jet engines, there is a sort of contest of strength of materials to be had where the jet engine would have to have a sufficient inertia and or sufficient strength of bolts between the jet and the engine and the wing to overcome whatever resistance there was, resistance to penetration at the wall. And if the wall proves stronger than the bolts that hold the engine to the wing, the engine would break away and would not penetrate. So there are
But Bob,
hundreds of different,
sorry to interject. I do
yeah.
apologize, but the thing is,
Oh,
I've been arguing with people on X today, and I can also relay that back to a Dave von Kleist comment with Dr. Morgan Reynolds chat in
ah,
Milwaukee in 2007, and it's just, but if a egg is thrown hard enough and fast enough, it can go through a wall. Because that's what everybody would come back at you at. So how would you explain that for the layman who think that if you throw an egg hard enough, it can go through a solid wall?
oh, given the strength of and the inertia, in fact, because the nose of the plane getting against the wall here, just the basic first thing to have happen. Two things are in working here. One is that the wall itself has inertia. In order to bust a hole in the wall, you need to move. In the case of Flight 175, where it was, there would be a minimum of 6 tons of mass to move in order to make the hole that the jet allegedly went in. And with that moving 6 tons of mass, 6 tons of mass doesn't move instantly. It takes, there's a time delay in there. Even if that time delay were a matter of milliseconds, what would happen would be that the very front part of the jet would have to decelerate from 500 miles per hour to zero very fast. And the destruction of that, the first few feet of the nose of the plane would then be the energy to make that happen would be extracted from the total speed of the plane. And it turns out that if you reduce the speed by 30 miles per hour and do so in 15 milliseconds. And 15 milliseconds is a completely plausible period of time for that sort of action to have taken. But what that does is that results in a jolt of 90 Gs. And the in engineering, they talk about G forces, where say there are accelerated. If you've watched Mythbusters episodes and they outfit an automobile with accelerometers and they do test crashes and they say, okay, this test dummy would have undergone 100 Gs of deceleration. What that 90 G deceleration means that something that weighed 22 pounds would exert a ton of force against whatever was in front of it to try and hold it down. The entire plane has dozens of things and possibly hundreds of things inside the plane that are bolted down in one form or another. And all of those bolts would fail. The plane would be structurally compromised at that point. So uh, you cannot assume that the plane would just penetrate straight in. Given a real slice it pretty fine and start looking at what should happen at each stage of the the process, you can see that there are things that are the kind of showstoppers, the kind of things that no, you can't do that this way. And uh, the idea that the official story promotes this kind of, oh yes, the plane was angled just this way, but it penetrated anyway. And this, I think, uh, plays into the big lie kind of thing that is a such a huge whopper that people just go, oh, I'm overwhelmed. It's the big lie, and I just have to go along to get along or something. And uh, it doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I'm kind of considered strange by my peers, uh, unfortunately. So,
So
um,
Bob,
But
just to clarify then, what you're saying there is so where the engines are attached to the wing or the wings, so as
yeah,
soon as the nose would have, let's say, hit the towers, come into contact, and all the, like you say, the shifting of mass,
yeah.
would them engines have detached from the wings at some point,
It's highly
or
probable. It's one of those things that um, because you have a 5 ton jet engine hanging on what is basically a bolted connection to the wing.
right,
And at such time as the plane were so much as forced to give up 30 miles per hour of its speed and do so very quickly, that jolt would be destructive to the plane.
right, okay, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Would we be seeing? Beans as let's just say the engines didn't detach. Would we be seeing an explosion because of the tanks in the wings with the fuel
Uh,
coming into contact at
what would
all?
most because of the jolt of deceleration, at the very least, you would see jet fuel that would leak out of the tanks and try and surge forward. And this is
Yeah,
one of the anomalies of the whole. Uh, on 3 occasions, the flight 11, flight 175, and flight 77, a jet crashes into a wall and in approximately a quarter of a second completely disappears inside the building. But the fire waits until after the tail has gone into the building until the fire starts, which is illogical because the thing would start spilling fuel from the moment that the nose hit the wall.
yeah, yeah. And I'm just again just to ask. Obviously, there'd be some type of because there's a lot of metal there,
Yeah.
steel, concrete, and aluminium. Surely that would ignite fuel. Could in some
Well,
way because of the
the
metal
source of
colliding.
ignition would probably be the electrical wiring in the plane. There, as soon as you start structurally compromising the plane, there'd be all sorts of sources where, even before a fuse blows, if something gets like some wires that are in an area that's being destroyed by this action, uh, there will be sparks, there will be things happening, and the jet engines themselves would be a source of ignition. So there's plenty of source of ignition sorts of
Yeah,
things for that.
yeah,
So the idea that on 3 occasions for the 3 flights I mentioned, that
yeah,
all of them had the jet fuel fire erupt after the tail of the plane disappeared into the building, which is a strange behavior to say the least.
yeah.
yes,
It's a major anomaly, and also there's this footage that a friend of ours called Matt, who runs MES, Matt CT Solutions, he done a bit of analysis while we're talking about this impact. He found out that the building didn't sway until after the plane was inside the building and the explosion happened.
Uh,
Would we not be getting a swaying of the building as the
well,
plane collides or
the
anything
the
like that?
whole building was said to be something like 500,000 tons of material for a skyscraper. And even if we pare that down to all you're doing is shifting some of the top. So just in
Yeah,
terms of the bending of everything, if you figure that the plane is looking into a mass of maybe 100,000 tons.
Yeah.
You have a 100-ton airplane crashing into 100,000 tons of mass. And what? Moving that mass? What would have to happen would be the plane would give up 100% of its kinetic energy and do so very quickly in order to cause that sway.
Yeah.
And that would then use up all of the energy available, such that uh, most of the wreckage would fall away down the side of the building, because the energy then required to make all of that stuff go into the building wouldn't be there, because it will already see one of the arguments that people say about this whole, oh, there was so much kinetic energy that it had to just penetrate completely. But in terms of, there's this big reservoir of energy, and each time something happens, like crushing the nose of the plane against the wall, there is a withdrawal from that reservoir, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller. So by the time the tail of the plane would be going into the building, there wouldn't be any energy left. It wouldn't. It's a ludicrous thing. They draw this graph of the kinetic energy. In the official story, they draw this exponential curve that said this is how the kinetic energy diminished over time as the plane entered. And it's a completely ludicrous curve, because it's unreal, and that given equal and opposite reaction, the destruction of the plane along with any damage to the building would consume so much energy that you can't do that. It's just, and this again, a lot of what I'm saying kicks in as far as kind of like my role as an intuitive, and what I've been trying to do is to get this down to an academic sort of thing, where I've seen other academic papers where people explain physical phenomenon, and they do it very well. And not being an academic myself, it's kind of a handicap at this point. But I think that it should be explainable. I've had people actually ask me to, oh, explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. And I go, I don't think I can do that. The only thing that comes to mind is in the early 60s, the space program did a whole barrage of explanation to go out and tell people, this is the space program, and this is why we're doing what we're doing, and this is why satellites are cool. And they aimed their presentations at the random 12-year-old. And I think that was actually very successful, because it 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 resonated with a lot of people. But
Yeah.
I don't know about necessarily trying to tailor a presentation to a much younger audience. I'm trying to hit an audience of reasonably well-educated adults, and I get frustrated in that it would seem to me that people either simply skipped science class or forgot everything that they were told in science class when
Yeah.
they
Or
uh,
basic common sense, because I saw a um, presentation where Adrian Monahan was trying to make the case for radio controlled planes, and then Matthew Estepo chimed in with regards to the swaying of the building after the plane basically got swallowed up and the explosion happened. And
mhm.
then Richard Gage jumped in and basically said no, but the plane was basically like going into a cheese grater and got sucked in, and that Matthew doesn't know anything about physics and how the stuff goes in there. But you can definitely see with the impact dynamics that you must have certain of the parts fall down to the ground, and we can get into the flight dynamics and this speed later. I take it you will go, but
Mhm.
that's these stupid counter narratives that the guys always throw in that might be plausible, but actually, if you just think about the rock hard, solid facts and
Mhm.
physics, it
Yeah.
does it does. You're making a stupid comment, and that seems to be the way that people always counter it, it's as if they want to ignore facts.
Well,
And
facts are big.
how can
Facts
one
are
get
difficult for
over that?
people.
Well,
Facts are difficult for people to accept. But just to say, because that's a good point there, what you made
uh-huh.
about with Matthew and that with what happened, which is why I wanted Bob to join the party here and
Mhm.
get some of his knowledge. And just to say, Bob, you don't have to be an academic to know certain laws of physics, which is what you're pointing out.
But
Mhm.
Bob, just come back. In the beginning, you didn't really say well what your background is because you are into structural mathematics and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Well,
not like you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. You see the background behind me here,
Yes.
where the that's a place called Springerville, Arizona. When I had a job many years ago, this was typical of the kind of trip my employer would send me out to Phoenix, and I'd have to drive a car all the way up to the way northeast corner of Arizona. This is up like around 7,000 feet, and it's a solar farm. There's buku acres of solar. And you see in the background there's these little white boxes. With the little white box, from this perspective, they're actually about a meter across, and they contain the power transistors that are the part of what regulates the energy from all this large farm. And my gig for a long time was just run out and replace power transistors when they need it, because the solid state electronics is by far not perfect. And my experience of things of uh, running out to these locations, and some of them were like in Tampa, Florida, and wherever. I had to take airline flights, and part of what I did probably for about the last decade of my employment, I told my employer, I'm not flying. Nope, we're not doing that. Um, TSA is a huge pain for people who have to travel for their trades. I had to put a toolbox in checked luggage, and the the TSA goons would steal from my tools. They would, it's, and the whole fiasco of getting patted down and whatnot. Um, it it's completely like a circus act or something. It's not real. And this is actually based on that they do airport security because, oh, for heaven's sake, we don't want these people to get on a plane and it be hijacked and all of that stuff. When in fact, the whole hijacked airliners fiasco from 9/11 is a total farce anyway. But uh, I did manage to get into a gig where I drove a company vehicle, and my territory was all the way as far as the northern border with Oregon and as far east as Jackpot, Nevada, and around and as far as south as Barstow, I think, sent me down there. But the driving trips were cool, and it kept me out of airports, which was like good stuff. But no, I had, from the time when I just got out of the Navy and my first job out of the service, I was actually working for a manufacturing operation, and I was doing production tests. We just get 5-volt 100-amp power supplies down the line, and I would hook it up and run it and test it and give it my stamp of approval and ship it. Um, and a crazy thing happened when manufacturing started moving overseas, and I got into other kind of the engineering designing. I didn't really do designs, I did prototype fabrication, but uh, eventually computers replaced prototype fabrication, where all of the designs are fiddled with on a computer. And so I had to go into, let's do the care and feeding and the repair and the installation of equipment. And that, it was a decent living and whatnot. So it was fine. It just kind of roll with the punches of how the industry has gone. I actually, during my sort of engineering tech end of employment. Actually had 4 different little Silicon Valley startups evaporate out from under me, because for every um, Apple computer's success story that there's a few dozen, probably a lot more than a few dozen little companies that start up, staff up their whole operation, start engineering product, and somehow or another something just doesn't come together. The venture capital goes away, and poof, we're out of here. And it's like, okay. So that's a little bit about me, and it's been a roller coaster ride of sorts, but it's been fun. It's
Well,
uh,
thanks for sharing that your background with us, Bob. And it's interesting to know, where you've how you
yeah,
arrived where you have, and it sounds like it's an interesting background, and probably put you in
yeah.
good stead for what you are discussing here today. So that's thanks for sharing that. Just as we go look at that diagram, what's on the screen, there's another question which I think would be helpful for you to answer for me, because it's obviously
Hmm.
something I suspect, and I think you shed more light on this. Is so as we got the alleged plane going into the building, perhaps the engines departing from the
Hmm.
coming coming away from the wing or wings. Would the tail section fall off? 'Cause I do see a lot of plane crashes, and it's
Yeah.
all the tail that's
The tail could separate, and in fact, if I can be successful in actually setting up a screen share here, I'll show you something. Let's
okay.
see here.
Thank you.
Um, okay,
Oh, here we go.
this
Yeah.
yeah. Now this is an airliner on a test flight. Notice the tail breaks off.
Yeah.
This was shot in 1980. There's actually an NTSB report on this.
Okay.
Um, they were basically on a test flight of a McDonnell Douglas airliner, and the crew made a mistake upon landing in terms of bringing it down a little hard. Yeah, a little hard. Broke the tail off the thing.
Right.
The forces involved were not sufficient to cause any serious injuries, but one person who was not sitting down, buckled in, seat belted to a seat, actually broke an ankle in the process, but that was because he was not sitting down and ready for a landing. But other than that, there wasn't any injuries on this flight. And the concept that you can hit hard enough to break a tail off of an airplane without uh, hitting hard so hard as to injure the people on board, that kind of makes a statement right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting piece of video footage there. So we would have perhaps expected that tail on alleged Flight 175 would have departed from the plane, come apart from the plane.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
in terms of fracturing, and this is one of the things about um, crashes, crashes are kind of chaotic and messy. So trying to predict what breaks first in terms of uh, would there's actually, in fact, let me see if I can actually bring this up here. Um, okay, are we seeing the video here?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's
Okay, we'll
yeah.
back this up a little bit here. NASA did a drop test here. They took an airliner type aircraft. This is actually a relatively small airliner, probably something along the lines of a 727,
Yeah.
but they dropped it, and the accelerometers inside the plane registered 40 Gs. Okay, so at
Right.
40 Gs, the wings broke off, both wings broke off the plane. Now, the idea that the um plane slamming into a wall, such as what was said for the planes in 9/11, this would be a lot more than a 40G crash, and yet uh, the idea that the plane remained whole so that it could penetrate and the wings cut into the walls, like leaving a wing-shaped gash and whatnot. Uh, no, not happening. The something will break, and it's a little bit
Yes.
difficult to say, okay, we're going to break the tail off, we're going to break the wings off, we're going to make the jet engine separate from the wings. There's a lot of when and looking over aircraft crash footage from the news reports a lot. There's what breaks first, and it's up for grabs. What will break first. A feature of if you see any news footage of crashes, very typically the tail of the plane is visible as an artifact of what is left after the crash because all the energy of the crash itself was consumed breaking up the front part of the plane. By the time it gets to the tail, there's no energy left to destroy the tail. So obviously the tail is something that's left behind. And that's a recurring theme with a lot of the crashes that are seen where and an argument that the loyal opposition will bring up is most of the crashes are low speed crashes that happen at landing speeds that are first thing after takeoff or whatever. And yes, they are relatively low speed, but it is illustrative of what what happens because like water flowing downhill, uh, the energy that's involved will sort of like take the path of least resistance and do things, whatever it does. And the idea of all this massive amount of energy, people say, oh, yes, there was X megajoules of energy available from this plane, but it'll get expended in terms of either busting a hole in the side of the building or just breaking up the plane. One way or the other, it will get expended and it will get expended pretty quickly. But it's not going to be in a focused manner of let's very neatly make a hole in the side of the building and have the plane just push right in there. The other thing about the push right in there phenomenon is the plane is basically a 5 meter diameter tube, and there's only 3.6 meters between decks in the building. So even if the plane hit dead center between decks and went in, there would be a lot of resistance to push the plane into the building. It would have to bust up the fuselage of the plane and or break decks in order to get that mass into the building. It's amazing to me, in fact, in the official report on the subject, they mention the plane debris coming in so fast as to sever core columns in the building. And for a piece of aluminum from the airplane to fundamentally act like a huge axe that has enough energy behind it to sever a core column in one of these buildings. It is completely beyond, it's so ludicrous. But that again feeds into, is this a piece of the big lie in terms of the psychological warfare? Because it will tell something that is so fantastic that people are just going, oh, well, we'll just go along to get along or something. Uh, and I don't know, the truth movement, I believe, should actually actively recruit some psychological professionals, some people who possibly have earned their PhDs in psychology and who are willing to examine the issue as to what's going on here and basically how can we cut through the the just the BS that's come down because so many people are just going, no, 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 this could not possibly be the case. And I get a lot of flack in terms
Mhm.
of uh, there's people who have their PhDs who have written academic papers in support of the official story. And
Yeah.
so basically, what is the counter argument that's thrown my direction is that Weird Bob goes and tells a PhD type that he's wrong. And oh, how dare you? It's uh, it's that way. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Credentialism again, isn't it? Where they try and use this
well,
credentials as some way of leverage to discredit common sense
hmm,
or basic physics.
yeah.
But just to go back with the tail section, um, it's from my understanding, that's why they place the ELT, the emergency locator
Yeah,
transmitters. They're put towards the back of the aircrafts because of that reason.
the feature that most
Yeah,
often the tail survives. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And that's another area that gets overlooked, especially surrounding the emergency locator transmitters.
Hmm.
So,
Yes.
um, yeah, that's very helpful clarifying that with the about the tail section, what we possibly should be seeing. Of course, we don't see any luggage or
No,
anything,
no,
after.
no. The whole thing in another another part of the features of this thing is when Flight 175 went into the building and there was the jet fuel explosion. There was like a cloud of smoke.
Yeah,
The There's what's called wake vortex disturbance, where the wake vortex disturbance should have been visible in the cloud immediately after the whole thing because it follows the plane in,
yeah,
and um, there's no wake vortex. There's a number of things that just say there's no plane. Uh, my objection to some of how the truth movement goes on about these things is that we get arguments that say, "Oh, it was a hologram that disguised a missile in the middle of where the hologram was," or it was some other technology that is strange stuff. And it is, I think, just as the bedrock of the explanation to say that having a plane crash in the manner alleged by the official story can't possibly have happened. Therefore, the official story is a lie. And
yeah,
we don't need to go out there into these tangents of was it a hologram or whatever, because so much there's so much energy is consumed with people debating was it a hologram or whatnot. It's crazy stuff. I will give interesting concession. I was doing some reading last week and I uncovered a thing that arborists are now using. There is actually a laser tree pruner. Now, picture this, a device that from 200 feet away, you can aim this device at a 6-inch diameter tree limb and laser cut that limb right off. Just poof. So you've pruned something that you cannot get up close to that tree, but you can stand back a good ways and do the pruning. So people don't have to like climb up a tree or whatever and prune. But it speaks of the technology exists as a product that some company can buy. They're expensive. They're like, tens of thousands of dollars, but it's a laser gadget that is made to like prune trees. And it's like,
yeah,
damn, that's a pretty wild thing that there is. So, in terms of yes, the technology may exist to uh, have some kind of weapon that was used to destroy the towers, but at this point, simply the explanation that the towers were brought down by some means that was definitely not a gravity-fed collapse is sufficient to make the case. And I'm reluctant to go out on a limb and say this had to have been some technology. So
yeah.
with
No, I get that. I think there is a sticky. Both myself and Norman, we do come across this because we do sort of delve into those areas that you mentioned, and there is a sticking element with that because it's like when you start talking about holograms or 3D volumetric technology, even though I've done a lot of research on that to try and prove that there was a secret program underway and it's,
mhm.
that went into the black budget and shifted out the way, out the public sector. And the military had a desire for that technology to be used in psychological psyops. So, like I say, we've delved into that and to prove the military did have a desire for psyops involving that type of technology. But that's,
Mhm.
we've looked at all the video evidence, but I do agree there it is a very contentious area and it does create a lot of noise. So I see where you're coming from on where you sort of focus your area, which is to uh, proved, it's very tangible where you're talking about laws of physics and what,
Hmm.
how the plane and the shifting of mass should be behaving in the videos. So I get where you're coming from on that and the way you're sort of your approach to that. Norman, have you got anything to add? 'Cause I
Yeah,
noticed that you were.
yeah. Just to jump in on this, this is exactly what Dr. Morgan Reynolds' 2007 QTAM whistleblower case against NIST subcontractors were for their fraudulent plane impact studies, as well as John Lear's affidavit. And he had many years with the flight experience, and he basically in his affidavit breaks down exactly what they also got wrong and the impact dynamics and everything, and it's very detailed. But
Hmm.
yet the 9/11 Truth Movement don't want you to know about that court case. Even if you, as recent as 2023, I asked people like Richard Gage, Ted Walter from the International Center for 9/11 Justice, who worked for Gage under A&E for 8 years, about these court cases, and they just play dumb because all of this evidence has been presented. It's been taken to court. So it's not like you can really argue the facts away about the impossible impact studies, impact
Hmm.
dynamics, and then also the flight physics. There's more than enough aeronautical engineers, aerospace engineers, everybody, even people from Boeing confirmed that a plane can't
Oh,
fly
yeah.
that low at those speeds. And then again, the wonderful real life example we had on November 12, 2001, 2 months and a day after 9/11, which was Flight 587, that
Yeah.
in heavy turbulence, the guy ended up shearing off the tail wing, and
Hmm.
on the fall to the ground, the engine separated due to the fact that it was going in excess of 240 knots under 10,000 feet as prescribed by their safe flying
Hmm.
speeds. So that is a real life example, and people still to this day, and I argue with them on a daily basis on
Hmm.
X, they can't just fathom that because we saw the plane on the TV fly into the building, so it must be true.
Hmm.
And that to get people to switch that off and just to realize that you can't argue against basic physics. It's really interesting. And
Hmm.
just to give you guys a bit of a heads up, old Ace Baker just sent an email stating nobody wants to debate him. So
Oh,
with his CGI
Oh.
stuff. So
Oh.
the email just popped in, man. Oh, so awesome. I'm gonna rip him
Oh.
another one on the email now.
Oh.
so
But it
Bob, we'll
wasn't the
just
court
hand back over
case.
to you. Hand back over to you, Bob, so you
Yeah.
can. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Wasn't the court case with Morgan Reynolds and John Lear? What didn't the courts refuse to hear that case?
Yeah, but you've got to remember
Yeah.
the whole psychological. I don't know if you've read his AI chat GPT, his assistant John Harold, basically.
Hmm.
If you not program, but if you give it the right cues and you have the right type of conversation with it, then AI can give you rather truthful answers. So it's a real skill that you need to have in order
Yeah.
to extract that kind of information, and that's exactly what he did. And in the interim, or just after 9/11, when anybody was trying to question things, it was
Yeah.
seen as treacherous, as anti-patriotic, and that's why they brought in the never forget banner, so rather quickly, is to
Hmm.
reinforce that trauma. Because remember, not what was 9/11? It was a trauma-based psychological operation on the people of
Hmm.
America and the world itself. So any person wanting to question the official narrative were made out to be devils, if you want to call it that. And
Oh,
that's why
hey.
it didn't have the chance in the courts. And then also, it didn't have a massive backing by the truth movement, um,
Hmm.
making sure that there are thousands and thousands of people outside um, the court house, and that was exactly the same what happened to Dr. Wood. Um, if there was more if there were TV crews, if there were more people knowing about it, then maybe the judges wouldn't have been able to like just sweep it under the rug. And we all know with numerous other stuff, and especially now with the COVID-19 debacle, nobody's being held to account. And after 9/11, especially a lot of the guys at the Pentagon, instead of being court-martialed or anything, they all got promoted. So there was a cover up since just after the last plane impacted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So,
just a little bit of background, if I may jump in on this. The concept
absolutely.
that right after the Kennedy assassination, there was a big push psychologically. There's don't question, don't talk about this because it's like a taboo subject or something. You mustn't question, was Harvey Oswald the only assassin or whatever? And it turns out that in the 70s, I think it was 1978 or 79, there was a congressional hearing held where they said, yes, there had to have been more than one shooter. And with that having been said, nothing was done as far as subpoenaing people to come in and testify and say, can we nail down who did it, who orchestrated this whole thing? Where's the conspiracy? Where are the conspirators? Can we make arrests? Uh, and it's frustrating to me to know that as a precedent case in the Kennedy assassination area, that there was post-assassination. It took into the 70s to do it, to produce a congressional hearing. And the conclusion was that, yes, there had to have been more than one shooter. And then after that, they just dropped the ball. And I would hate to see, with the current state of affairs, that there is some kind of official move, some kind of, we get a congressional hearing or something, and they say, oh, yeah, yeah, 9/11 was plenty much screwed up or something and whatever. And then they drop the ball and they go, okay, what do you do? Um, I'm concerned. Can you dig
But
where I'm
I see exactly that thing that happening now because what is Gage pumping out at the moment is this crime scene to courtroom, which is basically just window dressing. It's not a real congressional hearing type thing that's happening now. It's just
Mhm.
it's theater that is putting on, and it's
Yeah.
giving people an idea that they are actually doing something. And if they are so well funded, which they are, and been crying for a new independent investigation for the last 20 years while raking in millions, do they really think that the third time around when the government investigates itself that it's going to get it right? No, it's not going to happen. And my question is, if they've got all these experts and everything with them, the 3,000 architects and engineers or whoever's now signed up, why can't they do the investigation themselves? And again, why keep quiet about the two court cases that have been submitted in 2007 already? So that's just shows you there's a cover up on a cover up, and the people are actually funding the further cover up of what happened on 9/11, and this whole circus that they've got planned on in DC is again it shows you that well, what are they really going to do there? Because the information that they give is provably false. And they've got a whole day on the Pentagon, and not one of the three soldiers who've got first-hand account who were actually at the Pentagon can tell you what they saw and didn't see, aren't even on the talking roster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was somebody, and I haven't done that much heavy into the Pentagon whole thing, but I remember after the aftermath of the Pentagon, there was somebody who was quoted to have said, "I smell cordite," and that is explosive. Um, and that I think is very telling. If somebody at the Pentagon says, "Hey, I smell cordite," um, it's a distinctive smell of explosives going off, having been. Uh, around areas where people, do the
Yeah,
random
because
explosives.
it was really um, the timing was just right because they were renovating the area, and it was also
Hmm.
the area where they were looking for the misallocated $2.3 trillion as well. And if you go back to 2012, Jesse Ventura was making a lot of noise with his conspiracy TV program that he had,
Hmm.
and he also went through the various stages of getting to a final answer of what he believes to be the most plausible um, explanation for what happened on 9/11. And he even went and spoke to one of the ladies who was part and parcel of the 9/11 Commission report. And he asked a bunch of tough questions. And she said, yeah, but the government is partial to keeping things secret and all of that. So, and she also mentioned they didn't have real subpoena powers. They were underfunded and it was rushed and everything. And a lot of information was kept away from them. So he made all that noise in 2012 already. And not even much came of that. And he was also then ostracized by the 9/11 Truth movement because he wasn't towing their line. And he even took on Alex Jones with regards to some of the evidence that he thought was more plausible and had more substance to it. And since then, Alex Jones has also been playing dumb. Same with Joe Rogan and a lot of these big podcasters. And now you've
Yeah.
got everybody on this big bandwagon of bombs and everything, which you can prove that is not correct. But that just shows you again the smoke and mirrors that keeps on going. And
Yeah.
the real people have, in my opinion, the that are the closest to the truth and talk sense like you, um, are being marginalized and kept out of the limelight, and the algorithms and everything are against us.
Mhm.
And I can't
Yeah.
understand how the guys would go against the government narrative of the destruction of the towers, but they will still, on the other side, when they want to talk about the Pentagon and everything, still push the government narrative. It just doesn't sync. How can you say the one aspect is doubtful, but the other aspect is completely plausible? It just doesn't make sense. So what are you really trying to achieve? And I'm trying to understand that and expose that. Um, I I don't know what
Yeah.
your thoughts are on that.
I I'm kind of at a loss to know what kind of madness is going on here because there had been, to name names, a retired high school teacher named David Chandler who um, put out some brilliant pieces about the fall of World Trade Center 7. It was very logical, laws of physics, falls, the whole 9 yards. Good stuff.
Yeah.
And then on another front, he is seen endorsing the idea that a plane hit the Pentagon. And I'm completely at a loss to know how that happens. So kind of, if I were totally paranoid or something, I'd think that forces of the dark side got to him and twisted his arm in some way. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, one can only speculate on that, but even and that's where our Pentagon whistleblower Adam Eisenberg comes into play because he spent a lot of time reaching out to all the various players in the truth movement, if you want to call it that, and
Mhm.
he's gotten them on record on email and everything with regards to all his interactions and how he's been basically pushed aside or made out to be a madman. And even David Chandler screamed at him on a Zoom call and told him that he's suffering from PTSD, and he's putting all of that into a book, and he will be sharing some of his interactions with all of these people on this symposium that we'll be holding on the 11th of September. So please tune in,
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
you can get a little bit of that background as well.
Yes, for sure. In fact, uh, there are a number of sort of, be it Zoom calls or chats or whatever, that are uh, being advertised on September 11th. The specific one that you have in mind, would you mind sending me an email with the with that specific link?
Yeah, yeah,
Excellent. Yes, thank you. So, to go along with things here, the whole business, the flight 175 or the alleged flight 175 is the pretty obvious one. Um, but there is also flight 11 and flight 77 that are highly questionable. And but basically, in terms of focusing on things, the
yeah,
concept that we can see what something isn't without having any obligation to necessarily define what it is.
yeah,
And there's some important concepts in logic because people have, I've been into online forums in various places where people say, well, if it wasn't airplanes, was it a hologram? Was it, what was it? You have to, you have to complete the picture. Otherwise we won't believe a word you say.
yeah,
And that's illogical because being able to show that the planes themselves were impossible to have done what they were said to have been done, then that nails down one piece of it. And if you just proceed logically through the evidence, that's where things are. I remember, and I would like to have seen this actually spread far and wide, much more than it was. I don't remember the people's names, but there was a guy who was doing phone calls years ago, and he called up Boeing, and he got to talk to an engineer, and he talked about a plane exceeding 500 miles per hour at low altitude. And you can hear the guys in the background laughing because, holy, you dare suggest, it's kind of that just doesn't happen. And uh, that should actually get a lot more play than it gets because uh, the idea of having all the different parameters of how this was allegedly went on, plane crashing in the building, punching a hole in the building, proceeding straight in and having 100% of the plane enter. And uh, the the whole thing about the kind of uh, planted evidence bit where years after 9/11, there was what was said to have been a piece of landing gear that was found in a crack between two buildings in New York. And the thing I find fascinating about it is that the piece of landing gear had a rope on. It was like there was actually a piece of rope attached to the piece of landing gear, as if it had been lowered down into that crack by the rope. And people go, "Oh, we don't know why the rope is there, and it's an insignificant nit. Don't worry about it."
but
And so
also,
you have to question these things because if you don't question these things, it's sort of like blindly accepting whatever the news media puts out. And I guess since the days of Edward R. Murrow doing TV, there's been a tremendous amount of trust in. I know from what I've read about Murrow, he attempted to just deliver absolute the pure reporting of whatever he was trying to report on. And he was actually a very ethical reporter, but the news has degenerated since then terribly. And uh, it's it's as much as functioning as a propaganda arm of something. So
definitely,
uh,
definitely, I totally agree with that. Yeah,
yeah. So
And also,
um,
don't forget that the landing gear was also found wedged. One of the two buildings that it was wedged in against was a mosque.
oh,
yeah,
How nice!
I yeah, I'm not too sure about assigning very much weight to whether or not it was a mosque or a an office building or a Christian church or whatever, just a couple of random buildings that were there. But um, yeah, I'm surprised, in fact, that there isn't some kind of Muslim faction that has come back and says, we're going to launch a lawsuit for defamation of character because the idea that there was allegedly Muslim fanatics that hijacked these planes. And if it can be shown that the planes are a completely false story, then the whole case falls apart, and the Muslims actually have a case for launching a lawsuit. Except that um, I've had occasion to talk to just one or two Muslims from just having random find people, and it's they're not doing it, and it's something that I don't know. I can't light a fire under that particular process, but I see that as a possibility of doing something that would continue the fight for attempted accountability here. Because uh, so much, things could roll on like with uh, the investigation into JFK's assassination, that being in the 70s. There may be people who were actually involved in the assassination who are no longer, who were deceased at that time. And that's kind of a moot point of, okay, we've done this thing. If it waits until some time long after 9/11 to actually get something, some clarity, some official, this is how it really happened, and we're going to start prosecuting people, but the people that they would have prosecuted are already deceased because we waited so long. And I wouldn't want to see that happen, to wait too long to try and achieve clarity on this.
Yes.
But that's
Yeah.
exactly what Trump said with regards to some of the JFK files earlier this year. They said they're going to redact some of the aspects because some of the people involved in the investigations are still alive. They actually said that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, because I've been looking into a lot of the files and the ones that were unclassified,
Mhm.
and there's still a lot of redacted files still there to do in 9/11, and so they've got things that they want to keep secret. But in the files I have gone through, I've found quite, that were come out. I think it was around about 2009. There's a lot of files that reveal quite a lot to do with the planes and passengers that I've
Mhm.
been able to establish some, if you want to call it facts from on an official level, which has been revealing, and that's quite uncomfortable for um, a lot of the research community because it's actually coming through official means, which is sort of calling into question or supporting our arguments,
Mhm.
surrounding the planes and passengers. Just an example of that, Bob, is um, it's officially known in one of the documents I found that Mark Bingham, who was meant to have one of the passengers on Flight 93, it's officially now, written in their own documents that he wasn't on the flight manifest and he wasn't assigned a seat number.
Ah.
Okay, so this is official, and then we've got other official documents um, that come out showing that passengers that had reservations, which they cancelled for flight 11 and I think 77,
Mhm.
didn't rebook on the plane, yet that was counted as being on the plane.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then they found DNA of those passengers at the sites. That was another researcher that found some of that stuff out.
Mhm.
And that was like, I mean, it don't even tell you that they rebooked on, where it does state in other cases that they rebooked the reservation again. But in the passengers uh, that were looked at, they didn't rebook on the flight, yet they counted as being on the flight. And there's no explanation for that. But that is revealed in official documents that came from American Airlines.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to
There's
be
a lot of
gleaned.
things. Yeah, there's a lot of things in documentation and all. And I can appreciate that people have done the digging to find sort of documentation anomalies in the whole 9/11 thing. Though the issue that I personally have with how um, the whole official story goes down is they paint a picture about how planes crashed and did some damage, how the damage was done, and you can still find people just like writing Bart in San Francisco, who the random person that I speak to now and then, who literally believes that the planes crashed into the buildings and the buildings fell down because of the plane crash into the building.
Yeah,
And you try and correct them on this, and they go, "Oh no, 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 this is for real. You know, I have it from good sources and all that." Um, it's something that I think that needs to be addressed in how public perception is on these things, because uh, as far as I'm concerned, and I remember many, many years ago, being like in middle school, and the teacher is explaining about conservation of momentum and these groovy things. Just, it's fundamental physics. And one of the kids pipes up and says, "When are we ever going to need this in our adult lives?"
yeah,
And it's like there's some fundamental things to just getting the concepts down, that if the concepts are right here, then you see things in such a light as the big bamboozle comes along and they go, "No, that isn't real. Screw that." Like, okay. I I I do hope it's not getting overly technical on the the talk of there being a longitudinal axis of the plane wherein the plane is really not pointed in the direction that it's really traveling. And in the official story, it talks about a 3-degree offset, but given the tilt of the wings and where things are at with the attitude, my personal take on it would be there would have to be much greater than a 3-degree offset. But even at a 3-degree offset, if the true direction of motion is not along the longitudinal axis, then there is at the point of contact nose to wall, there is going to be asymmetrical forces developed that basically are going to either tear something on the plane off, break something. And it's kind of a toss up of what breaks first, but uh, the there's potential for everything along here to fracture and break. And with that, and I've heard the argument that, oh yeah, the plane broke, but all the bits just continued on into the building on inertia. And that in and of itself is also a broken concept, because as soon as you break the plane, as in there is more than one piece of it, each piece has reduced mass from what the whole mass was, and therefore at reduced mass, it's going to have reduced kinetic energy. And it also will be subject to the same asymmetrical forces that were acting on it to break it up, and the pieces will not stay together. There'll be a scattering. If anything, you could have as much as a shotgun blast of compute of airplane bits kind of imposed on the wall, but there wouldn't there could not have been the coherent entry like it was shown. And that in and of itself is damning evidence that there's something wrong with the official story. And to have uh, a like with the JFK assassination thing, they're talking, oh, it's un-American to question these things, therefore you should just be quiet and don't question. And if questioning these things can be suppressed by any means of saying, no, 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 don't talk about that. You're either not qualified, or you shouldn't do that because it's un-American or something. I think this is the reason why I brought up, if the quote truth movement were to recruit people who are psychologists by their education, we might have a chance of you know, driving into this psychological warfare that's being done.
I can
And
actually interject there and say that they actually do have two psychologists on their roster. They are both work for Colorado 9/11, Marty Hopper and Fran Schuer. And I have
uh-huh.
sent them emails to try and see if I can break their cognitive dissonance and their
Hmm.
premeditated ignorance. And they just don't want to go there. They can make a very good case for why it's so psychologically difficult for normies to break free from the official narrative, but they
Hmm.
themselves still need to wake up to the fact that they have been bamboozled and they've been caught up in Camp 2 under the um, some under psychological warfare, the second layer of the cover up.
Hmm.
Because once you get to the truth of 9/11, people just can't seem to handle the truth. And with your interactions that you have with people, they um, everybody says they want the truth and they're looking for the truth, but in actual fact, they actually just want somebody to confirm their bias because they're not ready to um, second guess the beliefs that they've held so dear. And that is exactly what I see with people, because you had the official counter narrative establish itself between 2005 and around about 2008, and that's when all the movies came out, like September Clues, Loose Change, In Plain Sight, A New Pearl
Hmm.
Harbor, and all of those that basically were good, and some of them had really good points, but also a lot of disinformation sewed into them as well. And to this day, people just stick to that. And you'll see that with various interactions when people want to debunk certain of the narratives, they fall back to research and pieces written in 2006, 2007, 2008. But hell, we're in 2025 now, and so much more has come out over the years, but the people just don't want to go there. And that is the 2007 to 2009. That's basically whenever you search somebody
Hmm.
or want to counter something, that's what comes up. And that's how the algorithms also just keep you in that camp 2, of being able to break through to camp 3, where the actual truth and people who've actually applied critical thinking skills end up being. But it's a lonely place, and the algorithms are against you, and that's it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
observed, in fact, in some forums, there are online forums where it's supposed to be a place for real humans to interact. And I notice that there are a couple of login names that come up, and they're decidedly AI things, because I'll mention in freaking milliseconds after I stop typing, their answer comes up and it is formatted exactly like the AI bit, where it has to grind through and sort of check all the boxes for what did the person before you say, and they try and address that, but they do it in such a fashion that it's pretty obvious that it's a machine on the forum rather than a human. And I
Yeah.
don't know who's sort of in charge of these forums such to tolerate that kind of crap, but it is what it is, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Something I noticed in real time. I did a podcast with Marianne Gabawa a while back, and she's into finance and everything. And in the presentation, I talked about cold fusion. And after that, and I posted that to my ex, all of a sudden I would get spam bots, crypto spam bots for every post that I post. And I would have up to 20 comments, which I had to go back and delete and block, delete and block, delete and block. And that kept on going for around about a month. And that was a real pain in the ass. And then luckily, whole fingers crossed that the bots will leave me alone, because the way that basically changes the algorithm on X is, if you get a lot of bot interactions, the algorithm sees your profile as a bot itself, and then you rank lower in impressions and everything. So I've been seeing those attacks against me for the last 2 years that I've been on X, and it's crazy. Certain guys started with around about the same kind of following that I had. They're up to 300, 400,000 people now. I'm still eking on to around about 40,000. And another strange thing, as soon as I got a little bit of traction and I could monetize my account, all of a sudden that week I was still setting it up, but I wasn't successful because we haven't got Stripe in South Africa. But that week, my posts all hit like 7.6, 5 million, 2 million, 1 million, and all of that in that week. And because I didn't finish it, then all of a sudden the algorithm turned against me, and it's back to just maybe a 50,000 year if you're lucky with a specific post. But usually it just meanders at around about 1,000, 2,000 or whatever. So that was really interesting to see in real time, that as soon as your account is monetized on X or one of these things, then the algorithm just pumps you out to the masses.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
a small matter of curiosity, Norman, if I may. You're in South Africa. Um, is there any police activity, any oppression going on with, say, people post controversial stuff to the web, and do they do
No.
anything?
No, whatsoever. You can insult anybody as much as you like. They
Oh,
can't do anything to you. I'm actually helping some people from the UK now get out of that totalitarian state, and they're going to be moving to my neck of the woods, and hopefully soon Mark will join suit.
The thing is
wow.
as well, Bob, I was going to say, and Norman, is we had something during the COVID which was called 7-7 Brigade, and they were monitoring comments, and they were overseeing interactions as well with people, and they were having their cards marked, spying on them. And that's totally public knowledge now that that was going on. And some more high profile people that were involved in certain radio shows, they'd had their cards marked, and they were actually
Yeah.
sort of monitoring their output. Anything against the official narrative to do with
Yeah.
the COVID at the time.
No,
But
but I see that now with this nationalism coming up now in the UK, Wales, and Ireland, with the guys hoisting the national flag and everything. And I
yeah,
saw a video of a lady who was at, I don't know where she was protesting, but she just had the British flag with her, and they arrested her. And I follow another podcast out of the UK, Trigonometry, and they posted a video yesterday of a woman. Who basically said something about trans kids, and they arrested and strip searched her for a comment she made about trans kids. That's
Oh,
yeah.
ridiculous, man. And a
It,
woman standing outside a abortion clinic praying in her head, not holding up a sign. She's just standing on the
yeah,
sidewalk, and they arrested her.
yeah. It's
It's crazy.
it is pretty draconian. And it's been ramped up over the last 5 years. And in particular, I would say it's become this last year as is very, very bad. I mean, they brought this online safety bill in. I don't know if you've heard of this, Bob, and Norman has, I know, because I've spoke to him about it. And I mean, I can't even access my own BitChute channel.
oh,
But I can't see
yeah.
it. I can post videos on there, but I can't see the videos I post.
Wow.
Nobody in the
Yeah,
UK can
yeah,
see. So
yeah.
this has become just like it's an absolute dictatorship going on in this country, draconian 1984. But I would say there's an element of the population, well, a large number of the population are clueless to what's actually going on. But there is another element of the large population, number of the population who do and who are fighting back against it. So you just got to keep your fingers crossed that people wake up. Bob, I was just going to ask you just to flip back to the plane image you've got on there with this in the building.
Yeah.
While I've got you here, is the the engine, the bottom engine. Now we've got that allegedly exiting the building and landing over in Murray Street. How
Yeah.
how would this pan out? I know they say it comes through the corner,
Oh yeah,
diagonal
it
piece.
allegedly exited from a corner here, but the idea you have at least 200 feet of deck here, where
Yeah,
if an engine did break off and skidded across the deck, the idea of friction between the engine and the deck, uh, it would lose a lot of speed, even if it started out at 500 miles per hour, which it most likely did not, because the speed would have to be decreased significantly by the act of crashing here.
yeah,
But the engine skidding across the deck would lose so much speed that the idea of it busting out of a corner here and landing at Murray Street is complete farce.
yeah.
Um,
How would it,
uh,
just to ask Bob, how would it, like the floors, because it's obviously the plane's coming in at the angle.
right.
I'm sort of thinking, it doesn't make sense to me that the engine, if it did detach and got through, I know it would be, like you
Yeah.
say, it would decreased in its speed. Um, would it be bouncing over the floor? Because
Well, it wouldn't
what
have
would be,
room to bounce across the floor because the jet engine itself is like 10 feet in diameter. And the idea, uh, well, the actual exterior housing is more like 10 feet, but that core, like was shown at Murray Street, may only be like 3 feet across or something. But the idea of, see, there's kind of an odds thing that has happens here, in that the way that the plane allegedly hit the building, what would have to happen is the jet engine would have to hit exactly in between floors, because if it hit in a place where there was a deck right behind the wall where it hit,
yeah,
then the engine would encounter something that was hard enough to basically destroy the jet engine against the wall at that point. It's a little bit like, picture if you have a wall that's made out of 2x4s and just paneling of some kind, take a big hammer and whack that thing in between studs, you're
yeah,
likely to make a hole. But if
yeah,
you smack it right on where a stud is, it's not going to penetrate.
no,
And so the jet engine, we're talking a whole list of, did it could happen like that. It's kind of a, oh, what are the odds of this actually happening? But we have things that are improbable in and of themselves, but a whole stack up of things that are improbable but seem to have all happened in sequence to make this event happen the way the official story tells it.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that because they try and portray it that it's gone
Oh, excuse
between
me.
and straight out, don't they? Through that
Yeah.
bigger opening on the corner there. But like you
Mhm.
say, obviously the transfer of momentum of when that collision happens, is just say if it goes through and hits some of them beams and it did go to the floor, you're still going to get some type of slowing down and
Yep.
maybe tumbling. Yet this engine comes straight out.
Yeah, but the engine
Yeah.
came straight out because the nose also came straight out on the other side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
nose out thing is its own fiasco.
yeah.
Um, to kind of pick apart photographic anomalies. Um,
Oh, that's a shame.
What did he do? What did he do?
Oh, I hope you. I'm quite enjoying this.
Yeah,
All the interjections, quite a friendly,
yeah.
nice chat. He's a
This is
nice
on the
chap.
right side of history.
Yeah, yeah.
He
That's
might
why I
not want
wanted
to
him
stick.
on.
He might not want to stick his neck out to what it was, but I think
He's genuine.
inside he knows.
Yeah, yeah,
Inside
yeah,
he knows.
yeah. He That's why I wanted him on. I thought he's quite a use. He's very like useful, as in like his knowledge
Mm.
on stuff like that. I hope he logs back in.
It seems he's back, but we can't. You muted Bob, and we can't see your face, so your camera is off and your
Okay,
You're muted.
I'm mute. Yeah,
Bottom
okay.
left.
There we
Yeah.
are. You're
Uh,
back.
Welcome back.
there is the computer gremlins hate me. Ugh. Um, I probably, get back into this just in time for you to wrap it up, but
Yeah.
that's cool. As far as um, I think basically we pretty much covered the topic of the the alleged plane crashes being a complete and total farce because of the uh, laws of physics violations and things like that. So I've one of the nuts things is that my um, particular circle of friends, acquaintances, whoever that I knew from when I had a job, uh, a lot of them this is sort of a novelty thing for them to get a subscription onto Bob's Substack because they're really, oh yes, Bob's a crackpot, but we love him anyway, and it's kind of it's one of those things where it's really even my own siblings who they say yes, we love you, Bob, but we don't understand what you're babbling about, and it's like kind of, which is is so frustrating because I have a brother who has an engineering degree,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
is sort of like, oh no, your talk about the planes and everything is completely bogus. Don't do that. So
Mm.
I have to stay off of some things. It's a little bit like the uh, family reunion or Thanksgiving dinner thing where you just have to avoid talking about certain things,
Mm.
otherwise it's going to start something and you just
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
don't
know
go
that
Cause,
there.
feeling. I really, really know that
yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get that one as well. That's because it shows we're human at the end of the
Yeah.
day and we all have our
Yeah.
trials and
Well, yeah.
tribulations. I have the same here
Yeah,
and
but
there.
the thing is also we saw during COVID that some of the most educated people with the most qualifications behind their names couldn't get that right either. So
Yeah.
just because you've got a couple of degrees behind your name doesn't mean that you can critically think. So
Yeah.
that's a bit of a problem for people.
Just to inject something, an off the wall thing, just to this day, I was at my bank last week and behind a huge plexiglass barrier in between the customer and the tellers at the bank I do business with still wear these masks to protect
Oh,
themselves from
wow.
whatever they're protecting themselves from. I go, just you're behind this freaking barrier back there where the tellers are. And they are, I guess, live in fear of some microbe or something. And it's just blows me away where there's been, I think society has become damaged because of this,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
uh, when and during the peak of things, to even walk into like a Home Depot store or something, there's a guy at the door who says, we require you wear a mask. I say, no, you can do without my business. I'm going away. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's it's basic choice. They um,
Yes. Yes. We
just
had
it's
that exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure Norman experienced that as well.
yeah
It's just not a good time, really.
Yeah,
yeah
I ended up being pulled over by the police in a roadblock the one morning when we were doing a breakfast run, and there you've got a group of like 15 police officers, everybody standing around there, and I didn't even have a mask with me.
yeah
Never mind not wearing one with all the
yeah.
guys, and they didn't even bat an eye with me not having a mask. So that was really strange in any case, going through an exercise like that. They just
Uh,
wanted to write me a ticket for not having a number plate on. So, but yeah,
oh, great!
So
Wow.
Bob, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad
Yeah,
we got this together and
yeah,
have a conversation. I was saying to Norman when we had that technical hitch there where we lost connection with you, that
yeah,
it's one thing having text messages with people, but when you see them, on screen and we're interacting, it's totally
oh yeah,
different experience altogether.
yeah,
And we know we really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can do it again and have a good conversation and touch on a few
Yes.
areas because
Yeah.
we've touched on.
Maybe get Dr. Morgan Reynolds on so that he can talk about his case and everything that he's been doing,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
he's the original no planer, or there's issues with a
Yeah.
planes person
yeah,
that's been ostracized for all these years.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd
I,
like to thank you for your knowledge,
yeah.
and what
Yeah.
you've shared today. 'Cause I've got a
Yeah.
lot out of that with what
Yeah.
with
Okay.
that example there, what you showed with the angle of the plane and the
Mm-hmm.
stresses on the engines and how that the
Mm-hmm.
attachment and transfers of momentum and all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff. I
it's
mean, that's
very
brilliant.
important
Yeah,
information. Yes,
Yeah.
and you don't
I,
come across people um, bring it over like Bob did. So it's
yeah,
really appreciated.
the thing that it's disappointing to me personally is I've lost faith in the courts, in that
Mm.
people attempt to bring lawsuits and the courts either simply refuse to hear the case
yeah,
or something. It just doesn't go well for it. And it's the antithesis of justice, right? The courts are supposed to be there for justice,
Neutral.
and our courts have just been compromised.
Mm.
yeah.
Yes,
I'd
completely.
100% that's exactly the case in this country as well. So
Yeah.
seems like a global thing, doesn't it? That,
Yeah,
some type of
Yeah.
takeover of the justice system, because it should be really named the injustice system, because
yeah.
there's so much injustice going on at the moment, and
Hmm.
a lack of justice. But I think you hit a mute point there, Bob, to be honest. But now I've really enjoyed today, and
Mm.
hopefully we can do it again soon, Bob, and
Hmm.
have
Definitely.
a catch up and have a chat.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for being
Appreciate
you.
the time so much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a
So,
good soul, I can
And
tell.
thank
oh,
you for allowing me to be in the peanut gallery.
hey, anytime, Norman. It's good stuff. So, I will buzz off here, and it's early here, but
Yeah,
have a good one.
you
Let's
can
see
catch up
here.
on some
Oh,
sleep, hopefully, Bob, because I know
oh
you
yeah,
joined us
yeah,
at 4 o'clock in the morning. I think it was your
Jeez,
time.
that early.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
yeah. I from my Navy experience, I used to do what was called the mid watch, where uh, literally the middle of the night watch, and I stood radar watches, and
Wow.
that's its own bizarre bit of funny business. But yeah, that's long gone. So I should take it
Yeah.
off here,
Okay,
and
sir.
have
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
as well. Talk to you again soon.
Well, thanks
yeah,
for being here, Bob, and thanks for getting up early over there in the US to join us. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
Oh.
Yeah. Bye.